And this is Web 42 and with Gabe, and we are going to take a look at testing the backend. So this here is the repo we will be using for this guided project. So hopefully everybody has this repo nice and cloned. Besides the repo itself, we have a few links on the Slack channel, the Jest documentation, the documentation of this library called Supertest, and there's actually one missing link of interest which we might want to have on hand, which is the Connects documentation. The Connects documentation. Okay. All right. Cool. So yeah. Back to the repo. Back to the repo. I personally have it nice and cloned on my computer. And with a freshly cloned repo, I often wonder just how stale are my dependencies, right? So looking at the package.json, there's a bunch of dependencies there, right? But dependencies get updated all the time. And they're dependencies too. And they're dependencies too. You get the picture, right? So there's a nifty library, if I haven't shown you before, which is called npm check updates, which is installed globally on your machine. So you go and do npm i-g npm -check -updates. All right, so you get that going if you haven't already. It's a really cool library. And once you have it installed on your machine globally, you can run the NCU command from whatever location. You might have to restart your terminal to make it go. Okay, but you can do things like from inside a project. For example, we can do NCU -u. All right, and this is going to upgrade all the dependencies in the package.json to the latest, right? So you can see how it found ESLint and .env to be outdated, okay? And it went ahead and changed the package.json to the latest and greatest versions, right? Of course, we never ran npm install, so we must do that also, right? npm I, and hopefully this won't take forever. Cool. So we got this once high severity vulnerability. It recommends running npm audit fix. So let's go ahead and see if that gets rid of that warning. npm audit fix. Let's do it. It's just going to tweak the lock file and maybe change a few versions around. And it seems like it worked because it's saying found 0 vulnerabilities. Excellent. Excellent. Questions, my friends? Cool. All right. Now, of course, we need a bunch of extra dependencies. So let's get that out of the way as well. No plain dependencies, I don't think. All we need is a bunch of dev dependencies, right? So let's do npm i-g, all right? I never pasted the ncu-u. Okay, cool. And then npm install. Apologies, I'm typing in the channel. Now, what dependencies we need? Well, Jest, obviously, and we need at types/jest to get the wonderful IntelliSense we were getting yesterday. And we also need this thing called cross-env. Okay, and we also need this library called Supertest. All of these, all right? All of these are dev dependencies. So I'm going to drop this command there on the terminal, on the Slack channel as well. Okay, this is going good. This is going good. Now, let's see, what other things could we do? Well, we have the ESLint .json going on there, right? It's already nice and configured, so it's not going to give us grief over global variables like describe or test or expect, right? So ESLint already knows we are working with jest. So what other stuff could we do? I don't know. Any suggestions? Can we run tests already?
You have to make a test file.
That's true. But even if we had a test file, could we run tests at this point?
We need a test script.
Yes, that would make things easier. And what other things we need besides a test script?
You have to run a server.
Sure, but more closely related to tests. So even if we, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, maybe because what is it? You have like the cross env. You need to npmi dot env and create an env file. I don't know, just a guess.
Maybe yes, those are things we would do in a real project, right? So the .env file, the script, the test script, all of that. But don't forget one important piece of jest configuration, which is the jest.config.js. The same way the ESLint has a configuration file, so does jest, or so it should. But we don't have any configuration file because we have to use jest itself to generate it. All right. Remember how it asked us a bunch of questions? Let's take care of that also. npx jest dash init, right? Let me copy all of these commands there on the channel. And actually, this assistant will take care of scaffolding a very basic test script in the package.json. Okay, so let's just say yes. No TypeScript. These are all the default answers, by the way, right? So I'm just hitting enter repeatedly. Node, no coverage reports, V8, no clear mocks. And there's our test script and here is our ESLint or jest.config.js file, okay? Now, this script is not going to suit the purposes of today for several reasons, all right? So even if we have a .env file and everything is properly configured for development, here's a strange situation that happens with tests. Tests utilize their own database, okay? So going back to the Connects file, which we haven't visited in a while, you'll note how the configurations object contains a development key, and this, as you know, will kick in depending on the value of process.env.node_env, okay? So we will have a value for that or a fallback to development somewhere in the project, if you remember, right? Probably inside maybe dbconfig. Let's take a quick look. Yeah. Oh, interesting. db _env. Okay. All right. Okay. Which one do we use? Do we like node underscore env or db underscore env? I don't know. Not a big deal. I hope. So let's take care of generating a database for development. Let's see if we are capable of doing that. Okay. And the normal procedure for making a development database, as you know, is with SQLite at least, simply running migrations, right? So when we run migrations, this configuration should kick in and we should get a hobbits.db3 database inside the data folder, right? Let me change that to db underscore env. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Let me see. I lost myself. Oh, yeah. We were about to run migrations, correct? Do we have a script for that? Would be neat. Oh, yes, we do. Excellent. Okay. Okay, cool. So with all these ideas a little bit clear in our heads, I hope, let's pop a terminal again and let's just run migrations. npm run migrate. Okay. Let me drop that in the channel. npm run migrate. Okay, that seems to have worked, right? Do we have seeds in this project? I believe we have seeds. npm run seed. Okay, so for development, we are doing these things by hand in the terminal. Okay, and because we have a fallback to development, because currently we don't have a .env, I don't think, right? So so this is the value for the environment, which means this key is what's being used. Does that make sense? It's a little bit mind-bending. Now, for testing, on the other hand, we want process.env.db underscore env. Why that particular variable? Well, because that's the one mentioned in dbconfig, okay? Because this is the environment variable we care about for deciding which database we're using. So this thing must have a value of testing for this configuration to kick in. And here's like a little conundrum, because we are running on development and we're running tests at the same time. So how can this variable have a value of development, but at the same time have a value of testing, right? So that's a little bit weird. And the answer is that when we launch our tests, we trick the jest program into thinking that this environment variable has a value of testing actually. Then this becomes testing, and then this is the configuration that kicks in, right? And life is beautiful, right? So how do we do that? Back to the package.json, the way you inject an environment variable into a program is by doing something like this: db underscore env equals testing. Okay, so when we run jest, this key value pair will overwrite whatever's in the real environment or whatever's in your .env file. Okay, so this is what will matter. All right. So for the purposes of the jest program, jest is its own little world where db underscore env is testing, whereas the rest of the program, on development at least, this has a value of development. Okay, and of course we need the other flags too, like watch, all, and maybe verbose, and another important one, since we're working with a database, because we're working with a database, we don't want tests running concurrently. We don't want Jest to spawn different workers for different test files or any of the clever concurrency stuff it can do. All right. So the flag we need is called run in band. Okay. And why don't we want concurrency with our tests? We don't want concurrency because, our tests are going to be reading and writing to the database, and we definitely don't want two different files to be accessing, two different tests accessing the database at the same time, or migrating it at the same time, or any of that, okay? So let me drop that test script into the Slack channel. Questions, my friend? This is a little bit difficult. Oh, and by the way, this cross env library, which we installed earlier, so this little trick of injecting environment variables into programs specifically might not work in Windows unless we prefix that whole thing with cross env. Okay, so that is the full. That's the full test script. Okay, for compatibility. There. Okay. Whew. Well, that was brutal. Okay, I think we're ready to start writing tests. Who Adam, it was you, right? No, let's get let's get a test file going. But first, let's take a look at what it is that we're testing, right? So because we ran migration successfully, we have a hobbits.db3 database. So let's take a quick look inside to see what to expect and to see what it is we're testing. Okay, so it seems hobbits table. All right, so we have a bunch of hobbits. It's a single table, very simple table. We have a bunch of hobbits there, and the API we are testing is like full CRUD on hobbits, and the model functions we're testing will be we'll be doing CRUD with hobbits. Okay, so that is our purpose, testing this API with Supertest. Okay, so let's start with the model. Okay, so we will be creating two test files. One test file will check the model, and the other test file will check the server. All right. So let's make the one for the model, hobbits -model.test.js. And if I'm going too fast, please make me stop. Okay. Now you'll be wondering, don't we have to migrate the testing database also? Didn't we agree we want separate databases for development and testing? But here's the cool thing about tests. Tests can take care of themselves. We're going to write them so that the test file itself runs migrations and seeds and all that stuff. All right. But first, let's make a sanity check to make sure we didn't destroy the universe, right? So let's make a simple sanity. And all that we are going to check is that we are using the correct environment, right? That our cross-env trick worked, right? So expect process.env, and what was it? It was db_env, right? We did this time instead of node_env. So expect that thing to be what in this particular environment? Development, right? All right, let's test it out. Find yourself a cozy terminal and run npm test. Okay. Oh, what? Lies. It's saying it expected development but received testing. So what's wrong, the code or the test?
The test.
You believe it's the test, huh? So we should do testing. Ah, and this is passing. Cool, I'll take it. Okay, so questions, my friends? Now, in order to test this Hobbit's model, right, which has to do full cred, we need. Let me know if the sidebar is helpful that it stay open. I tend to close it to reduce clutter and distractions and make more room. But here's the Hobbit's model on the left, the test file, and the model proper on the right. Okay. Now, to test these model functions, we also need a pointer to the database, to the database wrapper. So we also need DB in here, okay? And obviously we need the Hobbit's model. So bring it in there. Const Hobbit. Just like if this were an endpoint, right? You would require it. There, okay. And the tests are still passing, so I guess, and we can use the hovering trick and to make sure that these variables are what they're supposed to be. Okay. All right. Are you able to run tests? Give me a thumbs up if your local is responding. Okay. Okay, you can always reset to my branch, but remember to run npm install, just in case, after resetting. And remember to run migrations on development. And you don't need to run migrations on testing because we're going to do it programmatically. We never actually tested that the API is doing anything. We never even started it. We never even started this API. Okay, so would it work? Let's take a look at the at server.js. Well, yeah, it looks like this might even work, but yeah, let's leave well alone. Now, for these tests, we're going to need to run some code before any of the tests run. Okay, and then we will need to run some other code before each test runs. And then we're going to run some code after all the tests are done. After all. Okay. And these arbitrary operations, the three of them, are asynchronous operations. So do the async keyword. Okay. Basically, we need to reconstruct the DB, construct the DB from scratch. Okay. And then before each, we need to, let's see, we need to kind of like put the tables back in their pristine state, maybe reseed the tables, and then after all the tests are done, we need to disconnect from the DB, okay? This helps the tests exit gracefully, right? If we skip explicitly disconnecting from the DB, sometimes our tests refuse to exit cleanly, okay? Now, how do we reconstruct the DB in general with our terminal? How do we do that?
By
Say
running
you
the
change a
migration.
migration. You want, yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, by running the migration in the command line?
Exactly. And what if you made a change to the migration? What then?
Then you migrate out.
But you're already up. Say you're already up, but you're tweaking the migration in your editor. How do you make the database pick up those changes?
Can you just delete the file and then migrate up?
Yes, you could. And something a little bit less drastic. Just a little bit less drastic.
So maybe migrate down. Oh, roll back maybe.
Yes. Say you're on the latest migration and you tweak a migration because, you know, it's not deployed to production. So you can totally tweak a migration, right? But you need to roll back and then back up in order to pick up all the possible changes in your migrations, right? That makes sense. So for tests, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to roll back the DB and migrate it back up, right? And we can do it inside our JavaScript programs using DB. DB has a migrate object that supports several methods. We can do rollback, okay? And then we can await for db.migrate latest. Isn't that cool? You can do that from within your program, okay? Now, yeah. And because our tests reran, it's quite possible we have ourselves a testing database already. Let's check and see. Ooh, you see that? According to the Connects file, the development database was called Hobbits and the testing database was called Test. So we have ourselves a database. Okay. And the rolling back and migrating to the latest will happen every time this test file runs. So you might imagine if we have several files just like this one, it would be problematic to be, you know, rolling back and migrating to the latest and maybe destroying the database from underneath the other test file and all of that, right? So that wouldn't fly. So either each test file has their own database, or we run in band to prevent any issues. Remember this run in band? Okay. So thanks to this environment variable of testing, we picked up the correct configuration in the Connects file and we got ourselves a testing database. Now, before each test, we need to, I guess, run seeds, right? So normally you will have seeds in such a way that they truncate all tables for you. Maybe your first migration uses this magic cleanup library, remember? So we don't have that here. So we're going to do it by hand, but just so you know, that can also be done. We can do await DB, and then the Hobbit stable, we're just going to call truncate. And then we are going to reseed await for DB dot seed. Is it seed or seeds? I don't know. I think it's seed. I think it's run. Not sure. We might have to go to the Connects documentation for this one. Okay. However, well, the tests seem happy. They didn't break. And I guess we could simply pop the testing database open to see if it's seeded correctly. All right, let's take a look. And identical structure. And all right, identical data, right? So the tests start with the database in a completely predictable and identical state. And after each test, each individual test is done, we will kind of reset the Hobbits table just to make sure that each individual test has the database in a completely predictable state. This is like super important, okay? All right, that was a lot of information. So I figure we just take a little break. Well, let's just connect from the DB and then I can, and then it's super easy. All we have to do is await for db.destroy. Boom, okay. And this little piece of code prevents, it makes sure that it's not really destroying the database. All that's doing is disconnecting from it, okay? So let me drop all of that inside the Slack. And now, yes, let's take a 5-minute breather. Okay, we are back in business, and we never created a questions thread, I don't think. How's everybody doing so far? Give me a thumbs up if you're ready to move on. Okay, are we ready? Let's do this. Okay, so we were talking about testing the Hobbits model. So let's go ahead and get a describe block going. Describe Hobbits model. All right. Careful not to accidentally do async on the describe block, right? So I believe this breaks tests. All right. So testing hypothesis really quick. And here it is. Returning a promise from describe is not supported. Remember what we discussed the other day? Async function always returns a promise by virtue just of the async keyword, okay? So don't do that. Now within the Hobbits model, of course, we have several functions and we can nest our describes for better organization. So now we can describe, I don't know, get all. Okay. Again, lots of care not to async or describe blocks. And now, yes, the test proper. We can test returns all hobbits in DB. And because the DB is in a completely predictable state, we know how many there should be, right? Each test starts exactly like this. So if we use the get all function and it works, we should be getting 4 records. That's the number of records we should be obtaining. And each record should kind of have that particular shape. Okay. Now, yes, we are writing the test proper. So let's async it. Async. I said fucking type. And things aren't really so different from yesterday, except for the massive use of async await. We just pull stuff from the database and using the get all function, and then we write a couple of assertions against it, right? So maybe we could do const data equals await for hobbit dot get all, right? This is the function we're testing, and it appears to not take any arguments, which is fine by me. Okay. So what do you want to assert about data? Its length, its shape, what?
The length.
Yeah, let's do that. So how do we check the length of a data structure? What matcher do we use? Who remembers?
I have one.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to find it quickly, I'm typing toLen there. Okay, so you can. So if you type characters carefully, you can get to what you want pretty quickly, right? Like toLen there. Okay, 4. All right, so let's move this test up just a little bit so we can see our tests running. Okay, and we got our first passing test. However, always suspect false positives, right? And so break it deliberately, expecting 3, and let's see what the test does. Oh, okay. It says, according to the test, we were expecting 3, but we actually got 4, and this is what we are getting. All of that. Okay, so now we are comfortable. So let's do returns. Okay, so let's write us another one. Returns the correct hobbits with all their properties. Okay. Now what? How do we test that? False positive. I'll get you started. Expect data. Now what?
Isn't there a to have property method?
Yes. Although that would be, well, it's an array. But there's a really handy one. There's a really handy one that works with both objects and arrays. What's it called? To match property. I think to match object. It works with arrays. It works with arrays. Okay, and this one is really nice because it's better than to be. It's better than to equal because it doesn't need. You can test the whole freaking thing in one go, except instead of going element by element or property by property, right? So let's give it a try like that. Okay, expected value must be a non-null object. Okay. What does that even mean? Foo. I'm deliberately trying to type something that'll break. Expected has value. Okay, so apparently, this is not. How about now? 1, 2, 3. Huh. Now we're getting somewhere. It didn't like the empty array. Okay. Now we're being coy here and being like, okay, I'm expecting these 3 numbers, and it's spuking its guts out saying, no, you got these other numbers, right? Which aren't numbers at all, they're objects, right? So let's see, what would be the easiest way to do this? Let's go back to failing that other test, because I remember the output very usefully was giving us this whole thing, which I can now steal and put in there. Okay. Something like that. Okay, and I can drop it in the channel in a second. All right. Okay. Let's go back to length 4 and hopefully. All right. So to match object is pretty cool. And again, it works with objects and with arrays, right? So if Sam was capitalized, let's see what it would do with that, right? It fails. Well, let's rerun tests. Boom. Okay. Expecting Sam capitalized, but we actually got low caps. Okay, so definitely not a false positive. Once we get all these tests passing, I have high confidence in them. All right. So how do you like this stuff compared to yesterday? Easier, harder?
I think they are the same.
The
But
same?
This one, I think get by ID is a better option than do
Okay.
to have the property.
Yeah, let's try that. Let's do get by ID. Let's do get by ID. Describe. Get by ID. A completely different block. And now we can write a test saying returns the hobbit by the given ID. And this is async. Boom, boom, boom.
Hey, Gabe.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the last test, like what if our database had hundreds of objects instead of just 4?
Well, you would make sure that this initial state, which is predictable and always the same for all tests, you would probably make it a reasonable amount of data. right? So you probably don't need like a huge amount of data inside the application to make it reasonably realistic. But yes, maybe this wouldn't be a good testing approach if the table was enormous, right? But then again, because we are in full control of over how filled with data these tables are, it all comes down to our seed files or the fixtures we're preparing for the tests, right? So we are at least in control of that. But yeah, definitely. But it's the same situation. If this endpoint could potentially return millions of records, we wouldn't allow it. But I mean, not for the test, but not for the user either, right? So we would have pagination going on or something. So neither the user nor our tests would be able to just like, boo, request 1 million rows, right? So that should never happen if the database, if the application is properly written. Okay.
Okay, so those tests are just testing our seed data, not.
No, not at all. They're testing that this function, what we're truly testing is that this function works as it should. That is what's being tested. Okay. So of course, this model is extremely simple, but unlike endpoints, models have the potential to become very complicated. Endpoints, thanks to middleware, and because we can extract, we can process the request inside of however many middlewares we want. Endpoints usually stay nice and lean because of all those specialized middlewares taking care of checking all those edge situations and things. Model functions can be complicated. Imagine an insert. Insert sometimes needs to write to several different tables, right? So inserting a new something can be an involved operation. Maybe imagine this function were several hundred lines long, okay? So if we were testing it right here, that inserting a hobbit gives us back the newly inserted hobbit, you're not testing the seed file. You're testing the functionality of the model function, if that makes sense. But yeah, we're using always the predictable data, which shouldn't be too big. Sounds fair?
Gabe, I have a quick question. In real life, do we ever test production code, or is it just common to test, develop, and fix all the bugs on testing and then deploy the application?
So, okay, so many companies, what they'll do, each developer runs tests in their local machines. Okay, the exact same way we're doing here. So, and this is an important lesson to remember. It's very embarrassing to submit a pull request for review if their test's failing, right? So we're bugging our peers or our senior developer. Hey, I fixed this bug. Code review my ticket. I want it merged, right? And they come back like, hey, tests aren't passing. And you'd be like, oh, whoopsie. Okay. But some systems are more sophisticated and they run tests on GitHub. Like GitHub won't even let you make the pull request if it runs tests and they aren't passing 100%. So you have tests in your development machine, but there are also tests out there in the cloud in what are called these continuous integration pipelines, those DevOps magicians set up. So yeah, these tests are going to run potentially in several different environments. Yeah, I hope does that make sense somewhat?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and it saves a lot of embarrassment when it's properly set up. And the pull request can't even be created unless tests are passing there on the on the continuous integration pipeline. It saves us the it's really, really nice. Okay, cool. Let's just do this one and move on to testing. How do we do this one? How would you do it? How would you approach it? What should I type? Tell me what to type.
Use line 27, but you replace the get ob by get by ID.
Okay, so let's call it Sam. Sam is await because we're grabbing the first one, right? Await Hobbit dot get by ID, passing in 1, and that's the nice thing about a predictable database. We know exactly Sam's ID, right? And we are and let's suppose that Sam has the correct shape to match object. Boom. Okay. So if Hobbit get by ID is implemented properly, this is our expectation, right? So let's see if it's so. Huh. And this isn't so. We were expecting something and got null instead. What gives? Any theories?
I think it something to do with an array, maybe.
The get
I
by
don't
ID function isn't set up. It's returning
Wait,
null
what?
right now.
What? Seriously? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's entirely correct. But it's not all tragic because this this allows us to do a little bit of TDD, right? So imagine the flow. First, you imagine the functionality you actually want. Then you write the test to kind of describe that functionality. And once the test is written, you build a code that makes the test pass, right? Like return db hobbits where, I don't know, ID, right? Boom. Tragedy. Why is it failing?
You need to pull the first one.
Ooh, of course, dot first. Because we specified it exactly that way. We don't want this stuff nested inside an array. We want that, okay, and excellent, okay. What about insert? Let's do insert real quick. Describe insert. Returns the inserted hobbit. Returns the inserted row or record. Okay, and let's do what? What should we do now? False positive already?
You create input.
Okay. Do we need an ID there?
I think you don't need ID there.
Exactly. I was trying to catch you. I didn't. So we're running out of hobbits. Any other hobbits you can think of? Bilbo. Okay, so if the input is this, and then we be like, okay, const Bilbo, we're expecting the insert operation to return the inserted thing, right? So we're expecting that if we await for hobbit dot insert the input, okay, so we expect this thing to give us back Bilbo complete with ID and everything, right? And then we can expect Bilbo to match object And we can do incomplete. We know Bilbo is going to have an ID and everything, right? But so let's see if I can. And the ID is probably going to be 5. Nice thing about a predictable database. Something like so. Okay. So this is the test. But we could also test it like this if we wanted to, because to match object is not going to fail just because Bilbo has this extra stuff, right? So if Bilbo comes back with their ID as it should, the test shouldn't fail because these are least are there, okay? But since it's totally predictable, we can kind of like assert all of that, right? And so on and so forth. And same as before, TDD, the function is not implemented, so who knows what to do in order to get the newly inserted hobbit? Anyone remembers? You've done this a million times.
db.insert.
Uh-huh. Insert. Like so.
But don't you have to assign that to you have to get rid of that return and then like deconstruct the ID that it gives back, or no?
Yes, you could do that, but you can also do that .then. If you do .then,
Oh, okay.
you should be getting the ID. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing, right? So, whatever you prefer.
And then
But now
do
what?
get by ID with that ID.
Of course. Good. Don't forget to return the promise. Super important. Okay, so this is what you're saying, right? And apparently it passes. Super nice, right? If we didn't do this little part, if we just were lazy and just insert the hobbit, we would be running into this situation which would drive us so mad at the beginning of the unit, right? So we were expecting something nice. We were expecting Bilbo, and instead we got like an array with an ID inside. Okay. Cool. Questions, my friend. So we're done with, I'm going to call it quits for models, and I think we're ready to move to endpoints. And it's extremely similar, except for that endpoints, there's a few more things we can check besides return values, right? Well, actually, tell you what, we never actually verified that this insert changed the database, right? So maybe we should assert that now there are 5 hobbits in there, right? And you probably want to write a separate test for all of that, right? So these are like 2 different things: what the function returns, okay, and what side effect it causes in the database. And also you should never mix and match model functions, right? So you should use the db hobbits instead of, right? So if we're testing hobbit.insert, do not do hobbit.get in here anywhere or anything like that. That's another rule. Probably should be a different test. Probably. Okay.
Can you explain why it would be bad to do 2 of those in one? I get why it'd be bad to do 2 tests in one test, but can you explain why it would be bad to have 2 of those hobbit.insert or?
Exactly. Yes. So hobbit.get all. This is okay. So the reason for this is that if hobbit get all in particular were to break, let's say a junior developer on their first day come into this code and they believe they can make it so much better, right? They even leave a commit message saying, I made this function at least 1,000 times better. And I swear to you, I have seen this particular commit message on broken code. So don't Don't ever do something like that. Regardless, if our dear junior developer comes in here and breaks it, what tests do we want breaking? Ideally, we want to see these tests breaking and not necessarily any others, right? If we mix and match, if we do hobbits, if we do hobbit dot get all in here inside the insert, okay, when our junior developer breaks get all, yes, of course, these are going to fail as they should, but also the insert test is going to fail because it's using get all, and that's confusing, right? It's it's tangling these tests each other unnecessarily, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So, and this is a very easy trap to fall into, and it smells of bad tests when you have a situation where, you know, where something very specific breaks and then tests are failing all over the place. Maybe those tests aren't as surgical as they should, right? So let's go back to DB Hobbits instead. That way, when our junior breaks get all, okay, so the insert test is not necessarily going to blow up also. Whew, okay, let's, what do you say we take a breather? 5 minutes and start working on endpoints.
Yeah, that's good, please.
Oh yeah, there we go. Can you see it? All right. See you in 5, my friends. Okay, my friends, welcome back. I just turned on my fan. I hope you can't hear it in the background. Just let me know if it's noticeable. Cool. Okay, so testing endpoints with super test is what we're going to do next. 1 second. Here, I'm back. Too much light. Okay. So we're done here. I'm going to close both these files and go back to the folder structure. Okay. And normally we would test our server.js in one as a unit, right? So you don't need to test routers individually, and you'll see why in a second. So the super test library is going to swallow your server.js, and it's going to behave like a real server you can make requests against. It's pretty cool. Okay, so let's get a server .test.js, server.test.js right alongside server.js, and same as before, we're going to have server.js and server test.js open side by side. Okay. Now we need this super test library, so let's get it in here. Super test. Actually, let's call it request. You'll see why in a second. Equals require. It reads better. You'll see. Require super test. Then we need the DB potentially. Well, yeah, we'll probably need the DB as well, but we'll see. We'll see. What we need for sure is the server. So let's pull it in here. Shouldn't be far, right? Right alongside it. Okay. And as for connecting to the database, running migrations, truncating tables, disconnecting from the DB, all of that is identical to the other test file. So I'm going to actually borrow these lifecycle hooks. I'm going to just copy them from our model into the server. Okay. That's why we need DB. That head of mine. And pull in DB from the data folder and DB config. There we go. Cool. Take a look at our tests. So we have Hobbit's model passing our tests, but server.js failing utterly because, there are no tests. Okay, so that's reason enough for the test to fail. So let's make a sanity test. Sanity. Test sanity. Expect true to be truthy. All right. Let's see what we get. And that passes, and now we are completely in the green. Or should be. And on with our describe blocks. Describe. I guess we could do a big server.js describe block, but I figure let's get started with endpoints proper, right? So for example, we could describe the get to / and this I feel, there's no API, no nothing like that. It's just slash. And there's no routers. This is a very simple project. But if it were a more complicated project, it'd be the same. You would still pull in the entire router, the entire server. Okay. Now, what could we test about this particular endpoint? I don't know, it returns status 200, okay. So this is actually a piece of the response that's different from the data. With model functions, all we cared about was the data returned by the functions and the changes made to the database. With endpoints, there's more things coming into play. There's headers, there's status codes, there's cookies, there's tokens. I mean, there's more stuff, right? So let's async it. And let's build a get request with supertest, which is going to be like super easy. Make a variable, call it response, right? Or whatever you'd like. And then await for a request, which is a function that takes the server, and on whatever comes back, an object comes back from invoking supertest passing in the server. An object comes back with all these get, post, etc. methods, right? And inside there, we can specify the path we want to get, right? So if it were API/hobbits, it would be something like that. Here, let's just do hobbits. And actually, let's fix the describe hobbits. This is the endpoint. I mean, I guess we could, well, yeah. Okay, let's test this little thing first. I mean, since it's there, right? Now it's super easy. Let's just see if we can console.log res to see if we can make sense of the stuff that it has, right? Okay. All right, so there seems to be a lot of stuff in there. Okay, there's a status code. I believe there's a status also. There's a lot of things. So this kind of represents the response object. But it does have a res status. So let's expect a res status to be 404 maybe. And why? Because it's nice to cause the test to fail at first, just in case, to make sure we're not getting any kind of false positives or anything like that. Wait, what? Our tests are passing? That cannot be. Okay, there we go. Sometimes tests need a little nudge, right? So it's saying, hey, red alert, it's not a 404, it's a 200, which we knew already. It was going to be a 200. We just wanted to see it fail, and we wanted to see the failure because those are very helpful understanding whether we're going on the right direction or not. So if we go back to, if we put 200 in there, it goes and passes, but we're sure now it's not a false positive, right? And more things we could assert about this response. We could expect that res body to, I don't know, match object API up, I think is what it's doing. Okay. And that passes, but we don't trust it, of course, so we do API down just to see it fail. And here it's failing. It's say, hey, you were expecting API down, and we actually got API up. All right. Okay. Now we're cooking. Okay. So 90% of the time, you will be checking the status code and the response body, right? Most of the time, you care just about those two. All right. You can also do snapshot testing like you can do with React. Snapshot testing is a style of testing where you kind of take a picture of an object and if that output from the endpoint or the component ever changes, the test will fail, right? So we could do something like expect res body to match snapshot. In case we're feeling lazy, or what if it's a huge object and we don't feel like using to match object because it's a huge object and it would be a pain in the butt, right? So to match object takes a picture of res body and creates a snapshot inside a snapshots folder, right? And it's a physical file. The photo is a physical file we have in here, right? So if we ever change the output of this endpoint, the snapshot will fail and we will be shown the diff, right? Say, hey, this snapshot failed. Is this deliberate? Do you want to update the snapshot or do you want to fix the bug? Which one is it, right? So imagine we're not using this one. We're just relying on the snapshot, right? And suppose the junior developer comes into this endpoint with plans of making it 1,000,000 times better and does up with an exclamation point in there. Okay, so now we get the snapshot failing, and we are shown the diff, but between before and after. And this is where we make the choice. Is this change deliberate? Maybe it is. Then all we have to do is update the snapshot by pressing U. Okay, so give that a try. Hit U. The snapshot is updated and all tests are passing. Of course, this is dangerous because people sometimes update snapshots without looking too closely whether there was a real problem. But the nice thing about it is that snapshots are tracked in GitHub, so they will show on pull requests. So if you submit a pull request and you mindlessly accepted a bunch of new snapshots, they're going to show up in the pull request, right? So yeah, it's a very nice feature for React components or endpoints that return huge JSON, which would be a nightmare to test by hand. And any questions regarding snapshots?
When exactly does that snapshot get taken? Sorry.
The first time you write it, that's and the tests execute, that's when it takes the first snapshot and it considers it good, it considers it the reference, right? So that's when.
So you would you not want to use snapshot for like TDD testing?
No, probably not, right? So I view snapshot as a nice extra or for special situations like big output that would be super painful to test by hand, right? And where are we failing tests? Okay, there we go. Okay. For large JSON or even React components. Cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Really quickly what the API up does in line 25.
Oh, this is just like it's just a little, it doesn't do anything. It's just like a sanity endpoint, a simple endpoint that doesn't do much except return a predetermined piece of data, right? It's like for checking npm run server, right? And npm run server. And with the server running, we can hit HTTP. Well, actually, port 5000 is busy. FKill. How come? Who's hogging 5000? Who's hogging 5000? That's unacceptable. Okay, here we go. And then we can HTTP:5000/ and woohoo, API up. So that's it. There isn't any more to it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But you can see how the tests don't actually need NodeMon or Node to be running the server at all. So I can close this terminal with a trash can, close it with a trash can. The server is not running, but still Supertest can play with it like that, okay? Cool. All right. What should we do next? How about post? Or how do we post a new Hobbit? And you are going to help me with this one. Returns a 201. Created, right? Returns newly created Hobbit. And we could furthermore check that the database has indeed changed. Although maybe we could test that at the model level. So maybe the model functions, maybe testing the model functions would be enough, and we don't need to check that the database really changed, right? Besides the I don't know. Okay, so how do we do this? Based on what you've seen so far.
You do
No one wants.
start similarly to line 23.
Oh, come on. Declare a variable. Call it res. Oh, wait and see. Wait till you have to mentor your own junior developers. You'll see. Okay.
And then await, and then request from the server for that super test thing, and then you dot post to slash hobbits or hobbit.
All right. And here's one little difference from before. So with endpoints where you want the request to have a payload, all you have to do is chain a dot send with a payload, and you're golden. Okay. So what do you want to put in there? Name build, yeah. Something like that. Okay. And then again, very similarly, we could expect res status to be 201 and wait and see if the test swallows it or not, or what. Oh, my test crashed. I better run the. Oh, where's my tests? Where's my tests? npm test. Okay, so it's failing. It's saying it's returning a 200 instead of a 201, right? And actually, it looks like it's not even implemented. What a nightmare. Okay, so this is kind of like TDD. First, we use the test to describe the behavior we expect, right? And assert that it is so, and then it's up to us to make it happen in the code, right? And you've done this a bunch of times. Okay, the usual. Yeah, you would do it properly, right? Let's just do res.json. Let's res.status 201.json. Await hobbit.insert rec body. Right? Laziest freaking endpoint in the history of the known universe. Okay. And that's it, my friends. There really isn't any more to it. right? I mean, these tests probably should be more exhaustive, right? Like, but you know, you would test every corner of the endpoint. You would test that if you forget to send the name, you get certain error, and and with a special status code, right? So check any of the module projects and sprint challenges we've been doing so far. Take a look at any of those tests and look how thoroughly we are trying to crunch every little edge case, right? And then we derive a brutal sense of confidence from our project if we have dozens, hundreds of tests checking every little edge case, right? Questions, my friends? Okay, I'll let you write this one for me while I lean back and enjoy life. I'm going to start a timer. And show me what you can do. I'm looking at Slack impatiently, waiting for the code. No one dares. Of course, Kyle delivers. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Okay, Kyle, this better be good. Kyle says, all right, just, you know, I'll wait for response. It's a post. It's the same, it's the exact same thing. Okay. But okay, so here's one interesting piece of code review. One, it's good to avoid testing things that I've been testing already. So we don't need necessarily to check for 201 again if we already did it in the previous test. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then you are expecting res data to match object res data ID. Well, like a self-fulfilling prophecy we got ourselves here, huh? No. That this looks like something really evil. And it's not passing the test either. Let's see what it's complaining about. What's it saying? Cannot read property ID of undefined. Okay. So the nice thing of a predictable database is that we know for sure Bilbo will be in there with an ID of 5. Okay, so let's just do let's just do 5 as the ID for Bilbo, and let's take a look at the tests. Come on, tests. We still have a stubborn failure. Oh. Oh, something is wrong.
Is it because of res.data?
Maybe. Yes, res.data must be undefined. So what gives? What should we do?
Maybe body?
Let's try that. And the test will tell us the truth of it. Okay, all right. So that must have been the bug. Excellent. Excellent. As simple as that. As simple as that. Questions, my friends? And we would post defective hobbits, check those status codes, check those validation errors, right? So we should have potentially dozens of tests testing every corner of everything that can go wrong posting a hobbit, right? So that would be the realistic thing. Because normally the record we will be inserting won't just have a single prop. Chances are it'll have many props, and validation will be way more complicated than this, right? Than it would be the case here. Okay.
Wait, why is the data coming back like not inside res.data?
Well, okay, so res.data, that reminds me of Axios, but this is Supertest simulating an HTTP response, right? So it makes an object out of the raw HTTP response, and the response body is where the payload of the response is. Okay, so that REST data, that was an Axios thing. I think that's how we got mixed up. Maybe.
And you
questions.
had said we could log that, right? Just console log res.
Yeah, but I never seem to be able to. If we just console log res, we don't get very far because there's just too much stuff, and it looks like really strange, right? But yeah, maybe. So do you see?
Yeah, there was a body over there.
Oh, nice. I missed it, but
above header, I believe.
Yes, there it is. There it is. There it is. Super nice. And there's headers too, right? So say you are, I don't know, you're testing out the login endpoint. Then you check that the token comes back in the payload, or I mean, yeah, this is cool. This is cool, right? So when in doubt, console log res, and you'll see all the things we can actually test about the response. Okay. More questions? How are we feeling about this? So? Yes? No? You have dozens and dozens of examples of testing endpoints, right? For this afternoon, you will be choosing one of your projects and you will be adding tests to it. Okay, so you don't need to create several tests, like for on the one hand for model and on the other for endpoints, right? So you can focus on super test if you wish, and that is fine. All right, but try to make a bunch of comprehensive tests. Choose one of those projects that were really picky about validation, where you had to work hard to get validation going, and try your hand at writing a few tests against a project like that. Okay. Someone was asking the interview. Any advice about the interview? So just make sure you have projects on hand you can show the interviewer, like if the interviewer asks about state in front-end applications, you be ready to demo projects with stuff like that. Besides that, it's just like reviewing your core JavaScript, not getting your higher order components and your higher order functions mixed up. Remembering about closures, remembering about all those things, right? The typical stuff. Nothing brutal. You might be asked about accessibility, semantic HTML, and responsive design, and all these things. And it helps if you have something to show, to demo, right? And it also helps you remember, oh yes, this is a project I built with accessibility in mind, or with responsive design in mind, or mobile first, or whatever it might be, right? And more questions and things.
What will be on tomorrow's sprint challenge?
Oh, okay. Yes, good question. So tomorrow's sprint challenge will be authentication flow with tokens. So you will have to build a bunch of endpoints for authenticating a user and creating a user account. Now, before you get carried away, there's a little bit of a difficulty. The difficulty is that because tomorrow's examination includes you writing a few tests against your endpoints, it would make sense to have a test file in there. So, because we would kind of rip off, right, the syntax from. So the code grade tests are not inside the project, which means you have to take a lot of care to make sure your endpoints comply with the README to the letter, because you're not going to have npm test to immediately tell you how you're doing. Your tests are running in code grade, and of course you can go to code grade to see what tests are passing, what tests are failing, but you won't have access to the test code is what I mean to say. All right, and it would be very awkward to be jumping between your project and code grade super often just to see how many tests you're passing. So make sure you are like super attention to detail with that README, not a comma out of place, everything perfect. And yeah, but besides that, it's an easy one. It's easier than last week. It's just authentication.
Gabe, I have a quick question to you. When we're doing testing, ever using a pre-test script or post-test, does that ever come into place when we're doing testing, or should we always stick with the live cycles?
No, that's a great question, and you can, and it happens. So Jest absolutely allows you to run arbitrary code before tests, after tests, so you can totally do that. You will have to check the Jest documentation. I feel I remember you have to go into the Jest config, and inside of there, you need to tell it where those scripts are, right? So yeah, it can totally happen, right? So if it would be too unwieldy to have, or too repetitive to have in the before each or something like that, you can totally do that. Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
All right, and yeah, build week. So yeah, it's set up Postgres before end of week. Find a little bit of time if you can. Don't worry about the interview. Don't stress out about the interview. Talk to anyone who's taken the interview. They'll probably be like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad," right? Even if we fail, it's fine. We just take it again. It is what it is. Yeah, and besides that, yeah, thank you all very much. And thank you so much for your tremendous effort. Stay sane, stay healthy, keep it fun. Above all, keep it fun, right? So the fun factor is what carries us through the harder bits. Okay, so as long as you keep it fun, it'll be great. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
you, Gabe.
Take care.
Thanks, Gabe.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you all.